I mean, Pittsburgh, we're doing a lot better than a lot of other industrial cities. So I think that's something that is great and is really fascinating to a lot of people. On the other hand, and it has a really unique character too. I think we can say. I mean, just navigating. I think they talk about this a little bit in the book. Just navigating the streets alone is sort of this, insane puzzle challenge. That if you're not from here, I mean, I'm from here and I don't get it.
And I still have trouble. Yes, I'm still not fond of driving downtown.
No, it's this like
It is. It's an enigma for if you're not from Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
If you're visiting the town, I think.
What Pittsburgh locations will people find in your book?
Oh, much of it takes place in the Strip District. So there's a lot in the Strip District. So I mean, I think that's there are a lot of things in the book that are still in the Strip District that you can find. There are a couple descriptions, I think, of how the town is laid out that, I think anyone who's, again, had the challenge of driving through it will read some passages and go, oh yeah, that's, I've been through that. But I would start with the Strip is mostly what, where the bulk of the action takes place.
Is that a place very familiar to you? Do you spend a lot of time down there?
Oh yeah, I mean, definitely. Like through the years, I did work there for a few years when I was in high school. Somewhat similar to this character. I worked at a warehouse for a few years, and so I think some of what happens with this character is it was sort of a nightmare vision for me of if I were still in that position. I have a family. I forget exactly how they're related, but my father's side of the family had a produce warehouse down there too for many years. And one of the characters in the book the Lou character is sort of based on a great uncle.
I was going to ask you, are any of the characters modeled on people that you know? The character of Lou is then? Yeah,
the character of Lou is definitely. He was my great uncle, I believe, and he was very much like the Lou character. I mean, there's something funny. He can be amusing in some of the behavior, but there's also something really, I think, sad. And his house was a little bit similar. I mean, I guess today we would call him a hoarder. They have all these TV shows and stuff about the people. You go to their house and there's all the stuff crammed into it and you can barely move around. I don't think, then, 20, 30 years ago, I don't think we had quite the ready name for it then. So if you went to his house, you'd walk around and say, wow, what's going on with this guy? But yeah, that character, I think a lot of the characters definitely are based on people I've known.
Is there any of you in Dexter? Or any of you in any of the characters? Let me ask that question.
Oh, yeah, there is, definitely. I mean, I can't say I've never had, never was a good hockey player. Never got very far with hockey, outside of street hockey. I wasn't very good at that either. Never had anything like what happens to Dexter happen to me, I can say, and I'm happy for that. But as far as there is still a lot of me in the character, I think. I think there almost has to be, in a way, at least.
If you're going to write, I'm not a writer, so I'm not sure I'm going in the right direction with this. But if you're going to write in the first person, it would seem to me that it would be natural to sort of project some of yourself into the voice of your characters in that way, rather than maybe describing somebody from the third person. I'm not, as I said, I'm not a writer, so I'm not sure. I've never had that experience. Was it harder writing? Is it harder to write in a first-person voice than to do it as a third person, where you're describing somebody else?
It's a tough one. I think they both have their challenges. Like I was really, for some reason, shying away from writing this in first person, and what inspired me to go back and do it, aside from my classmates' advice, was she also suggested to me Jim Thompson is a writer who wrote a few sort of noir books, and the one probably the most famous one's called The Killer Inside Me, and they made a couple movie versions of it and everything. And so that was the one that Kalisha really suggested I read. She thought it was my favorite book when she read what I was doing, and I hadn't read him, so I went and read that book. And Thompson was a writer who, I'd recommend to anyone, if you want to read like first person, dark, noirish
Yeah, I was going to ask
stuff.
you to just describe how do you describe the genre of noir as a genre to a person who maybe is not familiar with that term? What kind of books fit in that category?
Oh, there's somebody, I can't remember, somebody somewhere has like a really great definition of it that I will butcher. I shouldn't even try to do it, but it's something along the lines of, people doing like desperate people doing, doing desperate things. People who are just in the pit.
Okay. These are not cozy mysteries.
No, they're not.
These are definitely with a lot of. There's going to be more violence in a.
Yeah,
generally,
generally, like the violence or even just people, the desperation will be, I guess violence. I mean, it's a lot of times like you have something like Double Indemnity too. There's also like a lot of times I guess with these books there's like the element of sex, where there's like the guy who meets the femme fatale, but the problem is she's married to this other guy. So all they know is they have to be together. The main character and the femme fatale, and how it's the only way to be together? Well, naturally, murder the husband, and live off of his life insurance policy, So that's like a lot of noir comes from that. Thompson's books were, there was one called Savage Night, which I've been recommending to everyone. It's a great book about a dwarf hitman, basically, who boards with this couple, I think in Long Island, and he's been sort of dispatched to kill the husband, but while he's there to kill, he's posing as like a college student or something, meanwhile like he's in his 30s, and meanwhile like he's there to kill the husband, but while he's at it, he's going to sleep with the husband's wife and sleep with the housekeeper and and all this. So I mean, you have these. You have that in noir, which I don't, you don't have in like a cozy mystery or a lot of other mysteries, I guess. So I forget how we got on this topic, but it was something about the first person and third person. Yeah, they each have their challenges. But reading Thompson was one of the things that said, "Oh, I got to try this." She's right. Kalicia's right. I should really think about trying this in first person. Let's see what happens. As far as one being easier or harder than the other, they both have challenges because I think first person you can then really rely on the voice. You can really get into telling the story through the way this character would tell it. Whereas with a third person narrator, you have the luxury of jumping around from character to character to character. You can talk about what different groups of characters are doing at different times, because you're not bound to that one character's point of view. But it's also harder in a way, I think, with third person, because you can't take the shortcuts that you can take through a character's voice. With third person, I think you're almost a little bit more obliged to do a lot more description and to really do a lot more scene setting. Whereas with the first person, you can just you can offhandedly describe people the way this character would talk.
Are there any other mystery writers that you admire that you would recommend to people? What are your favorite? Is mystery? Do you read a lot of other mystery books?
Here and there, yeah, and I've been since I've won this award, I've been reading a lot more. Prior to this, I'll admit I wasn't, and so it's been a very educational thing for me because now that I'm in this world, I've stepped into this world, and I'm meeting a lot of mystery readers. I'm starting to read a lot more mystery books. There are a lot of great writers out there. I mean, Thompson is really an inspiration to me, but I mean he's passed away like in the late 70s. I would still recommend anyone read any of his books. As far as people now, there's a writer named Megan Abbott who's really great.
I've heard the name. I've heard the name, and I don't know where or why, but I've heard the name. How would you describe her books?
Noir. They're noir. But she's writing, very much writing about the couple that I've read. I read one called Die a Little, which is really good, and one called The Song Is You. And she has a couple more. I think there's one called Queen Pen that's out there, and Bury Me Deep, I think is another one. She's writing about like 50s Hollywood, which is another, interesting thing in and of itself. But she's also writing from the point of view of sort of the actresses who didn't make it. So she's not writing about the big stars and a lot. I mean, she is writing about like the seedy underbelly of Hollywood, but it's from a point of view that you don't typically get. It's not the typical, from the point of view of the police or the point of view of the private detective who has the woman come into his office and say, you know, save me. It's more, a lot of it's more from marginalized people from that time period.
Makes me think of that, because I'm a little bit older, it makes me think of those B movies from in the 50s era, because I can remember those. I mean, I was a kid then, but I can remember those.
Yeah, and she writes a lot, like a lot of the characters that she writes about in those books are the B girls.
The B girls.
You know, so yeah, they're the actresses who aren't who didn't quite ascend to superstardom.
How about what is your interest in movies? Because of course the character they're looking for, Mercy, she is a film star. Was she sort of in the kind of B movie kind of actress? Is that how you would describe what she did?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, I think I describe her as having in the book as having, you know, being a big superstar and everything. But the kinds of movies she did were mystery noir, Maltese Falcon type movies.
Okay,
and she was like the femme fatale.
And your own interest in films?
Oh yeah, well, for better or worse, I'm a horror kid. I grew up on, you know, there's slasher movies, but even like older than that, like the old Universal monster movies were my first obsession as a kid. You know, growing up as a kid, I, you know, was all into like, you know, the Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi stuff, and I still had the plastic model kits of all these monsters and everything. And so from there, it went on to like all horror movies. You know, and there's a big passage in the book where the main character remembers, you know, growing up and going through a phase where he was watching a lot of those movies, like one after the other. You know, so for better or worse, I mean, that's my background. You know.
You are not a full-time writer, am I correct? You have a day job, so to speak?
Yes, I do.
And tell us a little bit about your day job.
Oh, my day job is I work for a department of the city. It takes complaints about the city of Pittsburgh police. So it's a pretty unique day job.
Yeah, I read that, and I thought that is a unique. And I wondered if that gives you any, ideas for your writing at all.
It does, but I have to be careful because, you know, there are a lot of confidentiality issues with it. So I have to really be careful as far as respecting people's privacy and not, you know, getting a complaint and saying, "Oh, that's great, I got to write a story," you know, and then, you know, and all that. But it is a unique job. I mean, you can't help but be inspired or influenced some way by just, you know, hearing people's stories and whether they're true or not, imagining, well, what if they are, you know, and of course there are the other sides of things too, where, you know, where you also think of, okay, it's scary that this person. Not even having anything to do with the police. It's scary that, you know, this complainant is out there walking the streets. You know, there are two sides to every, you know, complaint that we receive. In a lot of ways.
Are you doing any more writing now? Are you working on another book?
That's my next question.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Lane.
I am. Of course, yeah, I am. I mean, it's for better or worse. You know, I'm always going to be writing. You know, and I mean, I was writing before this for many years before I was able to publish this book, and whatever happens after this book, I imagine I'll be writing. You know, so yeah, I am working on another one, and it's not a mystery, really. It's not a sequel. You know, it's going to be a different book, much different book than In Search of Mercy. So we'll see how that helps me or hurts me as far as trying to get the next one published. But you know, I can't worry about that.
Well, Ms. Elaine, do you have anything else we want to?
I did have a question on the tip of my tongue. Oh, so when did you know that you wanted to become a writer? Were you writing at a very early age, like even in elementary school? Did you enjoy writing